want to start out by saying that while I think attachment theory is an interesting lens, it is just one lens. And so, in the world of coaching and pop psychology, and also in psychology, right, there's fads. Everybody's a narcissist. Then everybody has complex PTSD. Now we're all anxiously attached or whatever. So it's a thing. And unfortunately, one of the things that happens, and I've seen many of these come and go over the years, when people who are not really that well trained grab a hold of something that's easy to understand, like attachment theory, because it doesn't fucking take anything to understand that, right? So she's nodding over there, right? The nuance gets lost, totally lost, right? And it becomes this one size fits all, right? It's like this pinhole into an incredibly complex set of circumstances that is human relationship, and that's particularly intimate relationship. And so while I think it's nice when people are securely attached, I don't think that that's the marker for how they choose relationship, because there's many other things that play into that. So I'll give you some of the things that play when you really start diving into the let's say the healthier dynamics of coupledom, right? There is, of course, unbelievably dysfunctional stuff that comes with, drug abuse and sexual abuse and violence in the home and whatever, So I'm not talking that. I'm talking about at least outwardly functional people who are trying to work shit out in their relationships. That's my marker. And that marker, of course, spans a wide variety of factors. And so one, of course, is attachment, right? Yes, it's nice if you didn't have to worry about, the basics when you were a baby. Yeah, I mean, we can all agree on that. And that stands there. That's a little bit like you do a Myers-Briggs test or something, right? It's one thing, but it only explains like one slice. Another thing that's, I think, a lot more important when we look at the actual dynamics, but there's two things we could say, all which are also now getting somewhat fatty, is one of the things that you can really look at when you look at actual couples dynamics is early childhood individuation imprints, which are, of course, not as easy to, yes, you are, XYZ. So you have to be a lot more skilled to drill into an early childhood individuation imprint. I'll explain what that means in a second. And then there's, of course, what now is often called internal family systems, which in the olden days was just called subpersonalities, when things didn't have to be, where you have different parts of your being that are grown up to different extents. Right? Inner child work fits into that system as well in a certain way. So those are some really important aspects, because one of the things that really throws the whole attachment style situation is that assumes that all parts of that person are of the same, let's say, maturity level or value, right? Just because your parents, you and your parents attached nicely, doesn't mean that other parts within your psyche are okay, right? You could be nicely attached to your parents, but had horrendous bullying at school, right? Or a very unpleasant relationship with a sibling. We've heard some of that here, where the attachment was nice, but then, the sibling did something horrible or stuff like that. So within the context of subpersonalities, what we're looking at is, are the aspects of you that are not mature interacting with the aspects of your partner that are not mature? And what's that dance like? And then are the aspects that are mature interacting with the aspects that are mature in your partner, and what does that dance like, or look like. And so, interestingly enough, when you start drilling into that, you will see, and this is very important when you do actual psychotherapy and not just project. I'm not saying you do this, I'm just saying in general, a lot of people project their journey onto their clients, which is very bad. Just because you are a recovering, like your parents were in a cult or something, right? Doesn't mean that everybody else's attention towards their religion is cult-like, right? This is a big mistake that a lot of people make, that they thread everything through the lens of their experience. So even if you don't do that, you have to kind of look at the adult parts interacting as that's the functional aspect. And people can be really functional and make really good choices. And then you see in the therapy sessions, and you typically only see this after a while, that they have like a pocket of something that's like, where you go like, and that's the best I describe it, because when you hit that pocket the first time, you're like, what the fuck was that? And typically when you hit that pocket, it hits both people. So, but when you talk with them in therapy, they're very adult, and they're like, well, when she does X, I do Y, and we talk it out. And while I don't like that, I can understand why, this isn't the case. And you're like, oh, good. And then, then suddenly out of left field comes this thing that comes from some old abandonment wound that fully activates the other person's people-pleasing aspect, and suddenly they behave like maniacs. And when you're not there while they behave like maniacs, you don't know that, right? They come back and they go like, well, we had an argument, and then you have to kind of ask till you finally come to that place where you've seen that these two not adult parts have clashed. And so that's a very useful distinction to have when we look at why do people choose the relationships they choose. Right? The imprints never change. If they would, you wouldn't be able to navigate your life that is based on early childhood imprints. It's a little bit like, imagine, well, we know that to be true because we know that when you have a brain injury, imagine that you could forget the habit of driving a car. Right? Let's say I could heal you from your habit of driving a car. Well, what would happen to all the little tributaries in your brain that are connected to driving a car? It's not cauterized, right? Unless it's cauterized, meaning you have a brain injury, traumatic or through bleeding or whatever.
Integrated into your life.
It's completely integrated into your life. So the very thing that makes you people please your partner is also the thing that makes you good at some sports. So you can't cut this shit out. You have to illuminate it and grow it up. So then, of course, comes the very unpleasant work that most people don't want to do, which is to say, do I really need to grow these parts up, or are they grown up and I'm not compatible with my partner? Wow. Yes. Right? That's a work no one wants to do, and no therapist, not no therapist, many therapists don't want to do the work of saying, well, maybe these people are not actually suited. It's always, I am here because I'm so great at my therapy, I can make that square hole round, or that square peg round, right? Like it's the round hole square, or the square peg round, right? That's a prevailing wind, let's say, in the healing affliction that people have, sometimes, right, that they need to fix things instead of going, well, the way to fix it is actually have these people understand that there's no earthly way that they're ever going to get along. Right? For many reasons. So there's that part. You have to see, is it a part you can grow up? And then that's a very creative and very beautiful work that allows for things like self-parenting, for instance, right? Or generating much more positive self-talk or self-love, or learning how to communicate with a partner in a way that you're not triggering that person's stuff and all of that, right? So there is really good healing work you can do with the understanding that that step's always going to be there. Or you can build a ramp over it, you can walk a different way, you can turn the lights on, but that's one aspect. I'll give you an example that I've mentioned before because it's such an important example, meaning such a visible example. I used to have a client who came to me because he couldn't date. Like he was gorgeous and handsome and rich and famous, couldn't trust a woman, couldn't, right? So had two options. He either would pick, young, dumb bimbos, essentially, who he knew he couldn't trust, so he treated her in a certain way. But if he actually came across a woman of substance, even the slightest bit of substance, he'd constantly test her in these really weird ways that made no healthy woman stick around and attracted a whole bunch of crazy psychos. Right? Doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure that one out, right? But and so he didn't know why. And he was very securely attached. He had very lovely parents, which was, you kind of establish certain thing. And I actually knew his mother, so I know he wasn't lying either. So I met his mother later, in the not knew her up front, I should say. We're working on this thing and whatever. So eventually it comes down to he's about 2.5 years old. This is not the only incident, but that's probably, but it's the incident he could pinpoint. So he's 2.5 years old. He's in the backyard playing. He has no memory where his father is, but his mother is in the front yard washing the car. Classic American Midwest kind of. It's Saturday, she's washing the car. She's got the cut-off jeans and the T-shirt on. It's the 70s. She's listening to music just to paint the full picture. And she's washing the car and there's music going and it's amazing. And he's in the backyard and he falls. And he falls and he skins his knees very badly because if you remember back then they had these pavers that had the pebbles on it. Yes, it's late 70s or whatever. He skins his knees, he's laying there and he's screaming for his mother. And his mother isn't coming. And he remembers the blood running in between the pebbles while he's screaming. He had this total, slow-mo, super intense vision, which is how you know it had an impact, right? It's one of the reasons you know it has an impact. And she's not coming. And that was it. Right? Women can't be trusted. Right? It's a logical explanation. Right? So we eventually brought in the mother, which is how I met the mother. And so he's rolling out this thing, and she goes, yeah, that was a horrible day. Right? The look on your face when I finally found you. And so she explained to him, she was in the front yard washing the car, had the radio on, didn't hear him scream. It wasn't like he was neglected. It wasn't like she didn't care. It wasn't like she couldn't be trusted. It just happened. But she recalled in that session that from that moment on, he didn't want to be held. He didn't want to cuddle. He wanted his dad to bring him to bed. And it caused such a wound in him, and it caused such a wound in her. There was this whole teary thing and whatever, right? Once again, that doesn't erase the incident. It just illuminates the incident that he could go, oh yeah, okay. This runs through every fabric of my being that I need to do for myself, and I can't rely for love and sustenance and intimacy and connection, on a woman. Right? And then he worked with it, and he can articulate it, and he can guard against it in relationship and all of that. So he's married and has 3 children.